Okay, we're going to move on to Foundation 8. And Foundation 8 is witnessing and making disciples. Now, I've already covered some of this material already, so I'm going to make this fairly brief. Romans 10, verses 9 and 10, if you read that with me. If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is by believing in his heart that a man becomes right with God, and with his mouth he tells others of his faith, confirming his salvation. And if you add to that, God has given some in the church to be evangelists, but he has commissioned all of us to be witnesses. Acts 1:8. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be witnesses. Okay, two things on this one. So you say, look, I don't have this ministry of evangelism. You've got to understand that. I'm one of those 99 out of 100 who clearly don't have this ministry. So don't expect me to talk about it. I just live it. People see my light shining. I do all these good things, and I'm sweet. And through that, surely they will understand that I'm a Christian. How are they going to understand that you're a Christian if you don't articulate it? Of course we have to live it out. Of course we're called to live a shining life. But we are also called to testify, to witness to the reason why our lives are like that. A pathetic little story. They say it's true, I doubt it. One of those stories, okay. I heard it about the time that I was going to do my turn of duty in the Navy. So it's a long time ago. This young man comes from a Christian home. And his dad is very worried. He says, my son, the Navy's a rough place, eh? And those guys are going to give you such a tough time for being a Christian. But my son, know that I'm praying for you every day. And the Lord will give you strength. And you will be able to stand against any persecution you come across. Off he goes. He gets his first shore leave 3 months later. So my son, how did it go? Did you have a tough time being a Christian? No, Dad, nobody even noticed. Well, there's sad truth in that, eh? They didn't know that I was different from them, and I certainly didn't tell them. So if I don't tell them and I don't live it, they will not know. If they do not know, how will they enjoy that relationship with Jesus? You know what it says in Romans? It says, you believe in your heart when you hear the gospel and are thus saved. But somebody needs to tell you. Unless you're told, how will you believe? And how will somebody be told unless we go into the world and tell them? Religion says, go out there and make converts. Chalk them up. We need more people to fill our seats in the big building we've just built. And we need more finances. And besides, there's this religious rule which says if you're not making at least 20 new saved people per month, then you're under your production target. Relationship says, how can I not share this with the dying world? How can I not offer with humility and grace to those who do not know Jesus? How can I not tell them about him? How can I say I care for my husband if I just keep quiet about the truth? I'm not talking about preaching. I'm not talking about leaving these little tracts on the poor guy's pillow every week that some saved wives like to do with their unsaved husband. I'm talking about spontaneously and naturally sharing the things that are important. How can I withhold from the people I love and the people I know truth and life and light? We've all got that responsibility. I want you to turn to page 71 in the little bookie. And I know at least one person sitting here this morning, who shall remain nameless, and I won't even look at him, who undoubtedly will go home today and check this with a calculator. So please do, and if I've made a mistake, tell me. But this is an amazing little sum here. In the middle of page 71. If 12,000 evangelists of the caliber of Billy Graham made 1,000 converts every single Sunday, it would take 250 generations of 40 years each to reach today's present world population. So if you had 12,000, that's a lot, eh? of Billy Grahams. And every single Sunday, those 12,000 preached. And every time they preached, they made 1,000 folks responded to the gospel message. It would take 250 times 40 years to reach today's population, let alone what the population will be like then. Okay, but if you just took 12 disciples, like you, just like yourself, and you made just 3 converts every year, just 3, just like Jesus had 3 intimate disciples, and you taught them to do likewise. So at the end of the year, you released them and said, go and do what I've done for you. Go and introduce 3 other people to Jesus and build them up and teach them the Word of God and release them to do the same. And then you, in year 2, went on and took another 3 like that. The world's population would be reached in less than 1 generation. Less than 40 years. You know, it's that old grains of rice on a chessboard thing. It's geometric progression. I did take my calculator. I didn't believe it at first. I whacked it in. It comes up with e to the power 17 or whatever it is. This is a fact. Why do you think Jesus chose that method? This is God himself on earth. Do you think he could have not have taken over the synagogue, the temple? Do you think he could not have drawn a crowd of 10,000 every Sabbath? 100,000 every Sabbath? Do you think he could not have, through force of persuasion, won millions to his cause in his 3.5 years of ministry? Why did he choose 12 people? And a strange bunch, eh? Fisherman, tax collector, some strange fellas. Why did he pour 3.5 years of his life into just 12 people and then tell them to go and do likewise? Because he knew the maths. He knew how it works. This entire world can be changed if you and I take seriously the mandate to make disciples. Not to preach, but to share the gospel, draw alongside people, build them up, help them to understand what Jesus said and did, and release them with the challenge to do likewise. And the world can be changed. It's such an irony, you know. And I'm as bad as the rest of us on this one. We say, oh, this world is such a bad place. The crime in this country is shocking. It's appalling. It's terrible. It's horrible. Of course it is. But who am I? Do I look like the Minister of Police? Am I in charge of that? No. Now, Thabo and Becky, if somebody could just get next to him and tell him a few things, etc. But actually, if you and I went out there to those very people that are in prisons and have come out and recommit, you know that 80% of offenders re-offend within the first 6 months of coming out of prison? If you and I went in there and made 3 disciples in that prison, and they made 3 disciples right there in this captive audience that they've got. And when these guys came out of prison, they kept on doing the same thing. You know, that this country, how many generations would it take to permeate this country with righteousness, truth, and a law-abiding heart? Less than a generation. We could do it, you know. And it's only the gospel that will change people's hearts. It's only a relationship with Jesus that ultimately makes a difference. But the maths is pretty straightforward. Yeah, but you see, Chris, no. Sorry to have to tell you, you actually should know better than this. You've been in minister so long. Don't you realize that there's so few of us who are equipped? I mean, what if they ask me, so where did the dinosaurs come from? But, I don't know. What if they should say to me, so why is your God so selfish that he won't allow the Hindus into heaven? I don't know. So what happens to a baby before they reach the age of consent? I don't know. So why is this apparent contradiction here in the Gospel of Luke? I don't know. How do you expect me to make disciples when I'm so pathetic? Okay, 2 things. Why don't you know? 2, That's the minor one. Point I made earlier, I've never seen anybody won to the gospel through argument anyway. You know what? The people who ask you those questions are not interested in the answer. They're just interested in moving you along or displaying their own great cleverness. They couldn't care less about the Hindus. You know what? Somebody who asked me that question, I'm very wicked on this one. Here's a confession time. If somebody says to me, but what about all those Hindu folk? Unless the person actually looks like a Hindu, I say to them, are you a Hindu? Because if you're not, why does it concern you so? Surely you need to deal with where you are right now. And if you can get right with God, those other things will come. I think there's answer to those things. I think we can grapple with those things. But you know, what about the Buddhists? Well, hey, we can talk about the Buddhists later, but are you a Buddhist? Because if you're not, it's not relevant to you. Let's talk about where you're at. Let's deal with that. Third issue, and here's the big one. If you know enough to respond and be saved, you know enough to share with others. Or, what did you respond to? If you don't understand that we need to turn away from our rebellious nature, if we need to call on God's mercy, if you don't know enough to say you cannot work to earn your salvation, if you don't know enough to say, cry out to God and say, forgive me, Lord, give me a new birth and I will trust and obey you, then what did you respond to? Then maybe go back to square one and read this chapter again, which says assurance of salvation. If you know enough to be saved, you know enough to share. You don't need a training course, and you don't need all the answers in the universe. I suppose the crunch comes here. So you're in a court of law. Just think of the scene. And the counsel for the defense says, my lord, I would now like to call upon a witness to the car accident. It's Carol Kay is the witness to the car accident. So Carol, you please come forward and testify to what you saw and heard. What do? Do you say, well, I don't know too much about mechanics, but it's my considered opinion that the camshaft was a little noisy, and it's probably that gave the problem, and that's why the thing lost power at that moment, and thus had to swerve to avoid the cat, which then caused the accident. The magistrate would say, my dear, you're not an expert witness. I just asked you to come and tell us what you saw. Now, what did you see? I saw the car. There was a cat. The car swerved to avoid the cat and plowed into that poor lady's car on that side of the road. Thank you. You may stand down. Now, he will then say, I would now like to call an expert witness to testify to the mechanical condition of the car. And he will bring up a mechanical engineer or a mechanic or whatever and say, have you examined the car? What qualification do you hold? Would you please give us your professional opinion on the condition of that car at the time of accident? Those professional witnesses are the theologians of this world. It's not you necessarily. What are you called to do? You're called to witness to what you know and what you have seen and what you have heard. You're not there to give all the answers in the world. You're there to say, I can't answer those questions. That's a fascinating question. You know what? I'd love to be able to find that answer with you. Good question. Now let me just tell you what I do know. I do know that Jesus came to this world. I do know that he's the only one who can make a difference. Let me tell you how I came to meet him. Let me tell you how I experienced him. Let me tell you what a difference he has made in my life. And let me tell you that this can be your experience also. And if you would like me to help you to have that experience, it would be my privilege to be able to pray with you and to be able to take you to church and accompany you. What's hard about that? Is that hard? Who told us the lies then? Who told us that we had to know it all? Christianity is not a learned religion where we have to recite a manual and get 100% correct answers. Christianity is a relationship with the living Lord Jesus Christ. And we are called to testify, to be witnesses to that fact in our lives. And that's all. So, I did warn you that that dreaded little circle was going to come up again. Here's that nasty little circle. Okay, now guys, I'm going to be mean to you, all right? So I'm really addressing the men mostly. And forgive me, ladies, and I'll tell you why. It's because maybe it's because the female gender is able to multitask a lot better. It seems to me that most women have a far more sort of a holistic approach to life than us guys. We are compartmentalized and we are so focused. You know, if I'm working on editing a document on my computer, my wife can be standing right behind my chair and she can tell me the most profound things in the world and I don't hear a word. I have to say to her, Pat, if you want to talk to me, eye contact, girl. Because if we're making eye contact, you've got at least a 50% chance that it's going, that it's going in. Right, ladies? That's clever, huh? Yeah, that's how it works. Okay, so what I found very early in ministry, I would sit, and mainly it was with guys, and after talking for a while, here's what would emerge. They would have this strangely compartmentalized view of life. It's, you know that saying, it's just business, you know. Say what? No, well, business has its own rules, and it's just business, you know. In business, you are encouraged to cheat the receiver of revenue. That's clever. So you get brownie points for doing that. Trampling on the opposition on the way up to becoming the CEO is a sign of stamina and strength. Well done. So it has its own rules, just business, you know. Now, family is different. It's like these movies that we see of the old mafia. Have you ever seen these movies? Or, you know, man, I love it. It surprises me. These guys sit in church, they've got their rosary beads going, all this stuff, and they come home and they adore their children and they chuck their babies under the chin and they walk out there and they take a gun, pow, 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 they shoot 3 guys, blow the smoke off, and they're back in there to have a meal. Amazing stuff. I mean, this is this kind of schizophrenia, right? Okay, so here's the challenge. I'd like you to turn to this little diagram. I haven't made a note of its page number, so if you can have a look at its page number. There it is, 74. And if you would please just make a little cross. Its size and thickness will represent how dominant you believe Jesus is in that segment of your life. Make a little cross. Be as honest as you can. Again, it's for your purpose, not mine. So if you think that Jesus is, you know, a dominant force in your family life, you know, put a big cross in that wedge. If you think that when it comes to your own self-interest, your sport and recreation, etc., he's a little bit on the tiny side, and then put a small little thin cross. So let's just have a look. Well, you have a little look to see what different sized crosses are you going to put in those wedges of your life. You know, church for most of us, we would say, well, that's a pretty big cross, eh? I mean, it's on the wall and around my neck, and when I'm at church, Jesus is pretty dominant. And when it comes to family, he's quite dominant, except when I'm arguing and ignoring my kids because I'm too busy with sport or whatever. When it comes to self, no, he's really not dominant, you know, because, well, you know, some of the things I'm not so sure he'd be there with me anyway. And work, I guess if I pulled out a magnifying glass, I would be able to find a cross there somewhere. But most of the time, you know, business is business. And religion and business don't match. That's true. But we're not talking about religion. We're talking about relationship. I mean, don't you think